Hey, this is Scvrush from the UEN.com. Today I'm going to be talking about patch 1.2. As you guys know, Starcraft 2 developers just announced a patch note for patch 1.2, and there are a lot of different changes, and I just want to talk about some of the changes in 1.2 that will affect the strategies of each race and correct some of the imbalances. So yeah, this is one of our users who talked about the patch note at first, and let's get started. So here's the game changes. The first thing I want to talk about is the number of the statistics of each race being played right now. You can see that Protoss is 38.5, Terran is 38, and Zerg is 23.5. And to be honest, I think Zerg is being underplayed not because actually Zerg is underpowered or imbalanced. It's simply because Zerg units just feels very generic compared to Terran and Protoss. Most of their units don't even have an ability, mostly passive, and their race in general has less units than the other two races, whereas Terran, there's so many different units and versatility in their abilities. It makes them a little more interesting to play, and Protoss definitely has the best units in the game, or I think in my opinion, the coolest units. You know, you have Mothership, Colossus, Immortal, you have High Templar, all these fancy graphical units, except the Pylon Power, which lags the crap out of my computer. So I think that's one of the reasons why Zerg is being played less, because it's actually less interesting, not exactly underpowered. As you can see here in the win percentage for diamond play, you can see that it's very close to actually 50%. Protoss versus Terran 49.6. Protoss versus Zerg is a little imbalanced. I would say 3% difference is, you know, a pretty significant amount when there's so many games being played. And Terran versus Zerg, you can see that definitely this is not an imbalance at diamond. However, I want to tell you guys that at lower levels, this percentage gets distorted tremendously by different levels. You can see that here Protoss versus Terran has a huge advantage. Protoss versus Zerg is, you know, a little imbalanced on the Protoss or Zerg side, and actually Terran versus Zerg is, Zerg actually does really well against Terran in Platinum. In Gold it's a little interesting because Protoss almost dominate every other race. And you can check out some of the other statistics here. I'll put the link on the bottom of my video. I will really want to talk about the changes in the patch, and that's really interesting. You can see that number one, increasing roach range to make them more effective in larger groups, and that, I think that's a pretty good change, because roach really gets shafted in a large battle because they can't even get close to the enemy and can't really shoot anything, or can't shoot their acid, because stalkers can just blink out of there by the time they get close or run away, and tanks really just bombard on them, and it's really hard for them to do anything in large maps or large battles as well. So I think that's a good change. I'm thinking they're probably going to add 0.5 range on the roach. Not enough so they can chase out the Reapers, no problem. But enough to give them a slight range boost. I think that's a pretty good change. And Fungal Growth versus Blink Stalkers definitely I think it makes sense, because if you're Fungal Growth, how can you possibly blink? You are rooted, you know? So that's a very good change, and I feel like Stalkers is very powerful as well in large numbers, simply because Hydralisks and roaches can't really get close to them. On top of Storm and stuff like that, it's just really hard for Zerg to deal with that. And Barracks is going to require a supply depot, and it will impact a lot of Terran Reaper pushes. I'm not sure if I agree with the patch, agree with this change, but I do feel that Reapers are really strong early game against a Zerg player, simply because you go 5 racks Reapers, Braddock and TLO, and Cthulhu Luck does this all the time, goes for a 5 racks Reaper rush, and then after 5 racks, and then they go for like a 5 racks Marauder and get like Marine Marauders and just raise the Zerg player. But I don't feel like Barrack needs to require supply depot. So if that's the case, doesn't it make sense for a Zerg player to require a second Overlord before they could build a spawning pool? I mean, 6 pool is actually pretty devastating to a Protoss player on a small map like Steps of War or Blistering Sand. So I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I'm hoping that that will work out. I mean, if the standard build for Terran is supply depot, barrack, refinery, that's fine. I have no problem with that. And number 4, Reaper speed upgrade will require factory. I felt like they should have changed it to maybe engineering bay or something, but right now the Reaper speed upgrade will be so bad that it's probably as bad as, I don't know, the 250mm cannon for the Thor, because no one's gonna use Reapers late game, and no one's gonna get a factory just to get Reapers, because if they're getting Reapers, they won't have gas to actually get the factory. So I feel like engineering bay might be a little better, but we'll see how the game changes. I think they don't want the Terran players to rely solely on early harassment to win games, so they kind of just tone down Reapers by a lot, you know, nerfing their build time by 10 seconds, bunkered build time, Reaper speed upgrade, and barrack building with barracks requiring supply depot. So, and you have the last one, which is increasing the health of Zerg buildings. That mainly is to address Terran drops, Marine Marauder drops on the Zerg, which is really, really hard for Zerg to stop, and I can totally understand why Zerg buildings needs a little buffing. Yeah, Marine Marauders just devastate the Zerg from, especially dropped at multiple places. That's just so hard for Zerg to stop, and I think that's a pretty good change. So I think Terran players, at least for me, I'm gonna be going for more of a mech build instead of more of a strong macro build instead of early rushing. Maybe a double racks Marines and with some SCVs might still work okay, but in general, I think Terran should go for more mech build. Don't get that many tanks anymore, because tanks has been nerfed against Zerg and Hydralisks. Get a couple tanks, get more Hellions to counter against Zerglings, and Thors to counter Mutalisks. So I feel like Terrans should adapt to Zerg right now instead of Zerg. Zerg has been adapting to Terran, where Marine Marauder are so strong, but it seems like Zerg players has caught up to that. Infestors, the people actually start using Infestors, Mutalisks, and Lings instead of just massing Hydralisk or Roaches or whatever. So it's time for the Terrans to actually adapt to the Zerg now, simply because Reapers are nerfed and quite a few changes that helps Zerg players. And I think Protoss players are pretty even pretty good for this patch. Not really any big nerfs. So that's about it, folks. If you guys like what we talk about on the forums, you guys can subscribe to our channel, go to our website, or just talk about the patch changes below under the comment. And that's about it, folks. Thanks for listening. This is Scvrush signing off.